Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us on this webinar and hear from our friends at Columbus State about their data-driven approach to building the advanced manufacturing workforce. My name is Chandler Allen, and I'm an account executive here at Lightcast, and I am joined by Michelle Ward, who's the Director of Development, and Laura Whittle, who is a Senior Analyst. Quick little bit of housekeeping is on your sidebar, you will see kind of a chat function and a Q&A function. The chat function is there for you to add any comments. If you want to connect with your peers, point anything out during the presentation, feel free to use that. But if you have any questions that you either want myself or Laura or Michelle to answer, please put those in the Q&A and then we will come to those at the end of the presentation. This is being recorded and you will receive a copy of this recording and the slide deck a little bit later today. Today's agenda is we'll kind of do a quick poll. I'll talk a little bit about Lightcast, who we are, and then I will turn it over to Laura and Michelle to talk about their advanced manufacturing and their data-driven approach, talk about how they identify employer demand and wage trends, target program offerings to local industry needs, support grant applications and workforce partnerships, and broaden their access to alumni outcomes and employment data. And then at the very end, we will go to the Q&A, answer as many questions as we are able to, and provide some additional resources. So for this quick poll, you'll kind of see this pop up on your sidebar, but we really want to kind of figure out, what do you find most challenging about designing programs that prepare students for the future of work? How kind of identifying emerging industries and occupations, aligning curriculum to specific in-demand skills, securing industry partnerships and or funding, or demonstrating program value and ROI to prospective students. And we will let that run for a little bit as I hop onto the next slide, and then we will pop up the results. But a little bit about Lightcast is that we are a labor market intelligence company. We were founded about 25 years ago, and some of you may be familiar with some of our older names, MZ Burning Glass. But we work with all sectors of the labor market. We work with the enterprise, the business side, work with educational institutions, and we also work with those government organizations and workforce board. But what we really help colleges and universities do with our data is help align their programs with market demand, connect the students to promising careers, and help demonstrate alumni outcomes and economic impact. And then we can look at some of those poll results that should hopefully pop up. It looks like kind of the top result was securing the industry. I think it's securing industry kind of partnerships, and then it was going to be aligning the curriculum with the skills. So hopefully hearing a little bit from Laura and Michelle in a little bit will maybe help provide some new insights into that, maybe help with some of those challenges. But I would like to take the time to turn it over to them.
Thanks, Chandler. Laura and I are so excited to be here today talking about what we're doing here in Central Ohio at Columbus State to build the advanced manufacturing workforce. We have a lot going on in our region, and so we're going to talk you through a little bit of the quantitative data and our thought processes that we bring to our senior leadership, as we're making strategic decisions about meeting that workforce need. So we're going to talk about identifying employer demand and wage trends by region, how we identify targeted program offerings for industry needs, how we resource those new programs through grant applications and partnerships, as well as sharing out results and making sure that we're telling the story of our impact in the local economy, both at Columbus State with our wide community, including our frontline staff, as well as in the broader educational ecosystem and beyond. So we definitely view ourselves at Columbus State as a key strategic partner in economic development. We're that linchpin or that critical connector between our industries, employers in our region, and the workforce. We take very seriously our ability to develop programs, to specialize, and to meet the workforce with the skills and abilities that they're looking for in their emerging talents. Just a little bit about us. We are a large institution, so we're the second largest school in Ohio with just over 40,000 students served annually across 5 campus locations throughout central Ohio. We serve a diverse student population with urban, suburban, and rural students, and really we're the front door to the workforce for the Central Ohio region. Similarly, our manufacturing landscape here in Central Ohio is rich and diverse. We are the historical manufacturing state. Manufacturing is the third largest economic sector by GDP, and we have deep historical partnerships with legacy manufacturers. Honda, for example, has 5 plants throughout Ohio and employs about over 15,000 associates here in the state of Ohio. So deep partnerships there. Anheuser-Busch, who you see pictured in that graphic, legacy partner in the food and beverage industry, of course. Abbott Nutrition is located here, as well as Worthington Industries, which is a steel and steel product manufacturer. So we have a deep and productive partnership with our legacy manufacturing partners. Add on to that already robust and healthy ecosystem, we've got a growing emergence of new industry sectors into our region. So just in the last 3 years, we've had major manufacturing developments in advanced technology sectors. So Honda and LG set up a joint venture just about 40 minutes to the south of us to produce batteries for electric vehicles. LH Energy, that is going to have 2,000 jobs, many of which are technician jobs. Intel, of course, is setting up 2 semiconductor factories or fabs here just about 20 minutes to the east of where we're sitting now. And that's going to have about 3,000 jobs, many of which are, again, in manufacturing. Anduril, which is a advanced aeronautics and defense company, it is just announced within the last year and is opening a new facility, the largest economic development driver in state's history, with 4,000 jobs, again, in that defense and advanced manufacturing space. And we have a growing pharmaceutical industry as well, with a number of different pharmaceutical manufacturers, but notably Amgen, which set up in 2001 with 400 new jobs and 1 plant, and has recently announced in 2025 an expansion to a second facility and bringing an additional 350, very attractive, high-paid jobs into our region. Data centers might look like a weird inclusion there. We are number 4 in data centers in the nation. And while they're not a manufacturer, they compete for that technician talent. So they are looking for many employees with the same skill set that we see manufacturers seeking out. And so they are a big player in that talent ecosystem as well. So workforce development challenge. We have a robust ecosystem. We have new manufacturers and advanced subsectors coming in. And while Columbus region is fortunate to be growing in its population, there's still a big gap between the needed workforce and who we're seeing coming into the manufacturing career. So we have a big gap to fill to fully meet the workforce demand. And then layered on top of that, all of these sectors, both traditional and in these new industries, are evolving and changing at an incredibly rapid pace. With automation and technology change, AI implementations, the work in the manufacturing sector is really evolving quickly. And so as a community college, it's incumbent upon us to also keep abreast of those changes and ensure that we're continuing to meet workforce need. So really that brings us to the question at hand. So how do we strategically target our resources, knowing there's so many different needs across all these sectors, a deep employer base? How do we figure out where we're going to target those resources and make those strategic investments? So we're going to step through kind of decision tree and a couple of phases of that analysis process that leads up to those decision-making pieces. So program exploration, so simply trying to answer the questions of, are we already meeting the need in some way? Do we need to make a wholesale investment, or are we able to kind of enhance resources or tweak what we already offer? What should we be teaching? If whether it's a new program or a revision to an existing program, what are those knowledge, skills, and abilities that are required both today and tomorrow to produce successful folks for this workforce? How do we plan for growth and accommodate the growth in the sector? And then lastly, how are we measuring our success and knowing that our students are finding successful careers once they graduate and leave the college? And I'll hand it off to Laura here.
Thanks, Michelle. Our first topic is program exploration. There are a number of things we need to consider when we're determining whether we should offer a new program. And that first step there at the top is there sufficient labor market need for this role? If not, then we don't need to develop new content. If there is, then we move to the next question, which is, do we have a program that already teaches these in-demand skills? If we do, then we can focus on recruiting into the program we already have. If we don't, then we need to consider a couple of different options for developing content. We could build supplemental content for an existing class. We could add new courses or specialization, or we could develop a brand new program. We're going to walk through that flow chart using a hypothetical situation. And in that scenario, a pharmaceutical manufacturing company is opening a new plant in Central Ohio. Their employer has come to us. They have described the job that they're looking to hire for and the needs for that position. And we think that's a need for chemical plant and system operators as the occupation. And the question is, should Columbus State develop a program? Now, when we get asked these questions, people like Michelle, who are really embedded in what's happening in the industry, is already going to have some background thoughts, some baseline responses, which here would be that Columbus State already offers a 3-month workforce program in GMP manufacturing, and it teaches a lot of the skills that this pharmaceutical manufacturer is looking for, but it doesn't focus on chemicals. We also have a 2-year associate of science degree with a chemistry focus. So that's kind of the baseline thoughts we would have going into this process. That first step asks if there's enough labor market information to suggest that there is a need for this role. LMI helps us paint a picture of what's happening in the economy. And that picture really resembles the lower right picture, which is this impressionist kind of picture. It has some general shapes and outlines that you can identify. There's some water, there's a building, there's some colors. It's not as sharp or as clear necessarily as that portrait on the left, but it's definitely not as chaotic as what we're seeing in the right from the Jackson Pollock picture. So the LMI isn't as sharp or as chaotic because sometimes the data lags a little bit. Like Michelle just mentioned how the manufacturers are changing very quickly, and sometimes the labor market information isn't keeping up to date with those changes. So for example, say this landmark deal is coming into our neighborhood that wasn't there when they did the projections. That's not going to be in the projections then. So we need to keep open this line of communication with our employers and our industry so that we can continue building out this picture that we're trying to paint. Columbus State uses Lightcast analyst tool to look at labor market information to determine if there is enough need for the role. And the first part of that process really is determining which occupation are we talking about. Most people don't give you a SOC code when you ask them what they do for a living. They tell you a job title, they tell you the skills that they have. Employers often do a similar thing. And so the first step is identifying the occupation, which you could do using the job title to occupation crosswalk that the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics has. You could also look at the descriptions that the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics has for their occupational codes and landing on the one that feels most appropriate for the need of the employer. I'm only including a few data points from some Lightcast reports here to help illustrate the process. There is more information out there if this is a path that you're going to choose to go down. So we landed on the occupation of chemical plant and system operators in our scenario. We're only looking at labor market information for the Central Ohio region. That's an 11-county region that we at Columbus State defined. And here we can see that there are 109 jobs in that occupation in Central Ohio in 2024. Now, this is not the number of openings. This is the total number of jobs. The openings will be fewer. Well, we need local information to understand what this number means. So in Columbus, there are 1.2 million jobs. I also took a look at an occupation that neighbors the one that we're interested in, which is the chemical equipment operators and tenders jobs. Well, there's 1,200 jobs in Central Ohio in that occupation. So that with that context, we see that 109 is not a very large number. And so that's something we would want to keep in mind is what we don't want to train a lot of students for opportunities that are so small, right? We want to keep in mind the scale here. The next piece of information we're interested in is what is the compensation in our area for people who work in these occupations? And here in Central Ohio, that would be around $60,000. And we can see from the table that they're comparing to a national median. And this is much lower than the national median for salary for people in this occupation. However, Columbus, Ohio is not a high cost of living area. And we see here on the right, MIT's living wage for one adult with 0 children in Columbus is $46,000. So this might actually be a really good opportunity for our graduates. The final number on this slide is the job posting demand, which is the number of postings per month. And that's unique postings, so unique positions. It's about average. So people aren't desperately trying to hire for this role, but they're also not hiring for this role. This gives us a baseline of where we are in the economy in regards to this particular occupation in our area. We're also interested in where we will be in 5 years. And here we're looking at the projected growth in the number of jobs in the occupation we're interested in, the chemical plant and system operators, and that nearby occupation. Here we see that they are expected to change by 1 to 2% from 2024 to 2029. In real numbers, that's 15 jobs over the next 5 years. However, like I mentioned before, if there's a landmark deal, this number could be dramatically off, right? It wouldn't include this new employer bringing 4,000 jobs into the region. So it's important to keep that in mind. Another piece of information I added here was the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics economic growth rate categories down at the bottom. So this 1 to 2% change falls into that slower than average category. And it's helpful to bring this kind of content when you're sharing with your leadership, because if it's 5%, is 5% good is the question that I get asked sometimes. And it's helpful to have this kind of outside source to look at and say, here's the benchmarks of what we might be looking for in terms of these growth rates. So far, we've been talking a lot about what the employer needs, but we also are interested in our own needs as an institution, right? And one of the things that we don't want to do is create a program that competes with an existing program that makes it difficult for us to get the number of students that we would need to sustain that program. So a question we need to ask ourselves is there any other program of study in the Central Ohio region that's already feeding this occupation? And that can be a hard question to answer, because how do you know which programs should feed this occupation? So you can start with the SIP to SOC crosswalk that the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out. SIP codes are assigned by institutions of higher education to programs of study and helps group them so that we can compare ourselves across institutions. So all IT programs are going to have a very similar SIP code. The SOC code, again, is the occupational code assigned by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics to different occupations. So what this crosswalk does is say, here are all the SIP codes that align to these SOC codes, so all the program codes that align to this occupation. And here I just looked for chemical plant and system operators and found 3 SIP codes. Columbus State does not offer any programs that have these SIP codes, but neither does anyone else in the Central Ohio region. And I should say they do not offer 2-year programs or certificate programs that have these SIP codes aligned. So right now, what we see is a low number of jobs is the baseline. We don't see a huge projected growth with what's showing in the data right now. And we also don't see any programs that are already set up to feed these occupations. All of this suggests that we need to have a follow-up conversation with employers. And the first question we probably need to ask them is, did we identify the right SOC code? Is this the occupation that you are talking about? Because if it's not, then we're probably going to have to go back to the drawing board a little bit, right? The next question is, how many positions will this new plant create? Because if the need is high enough, then maybe there is enough need to validate creating a new program or new content. And it might drive what kind of content we're going to create also. A third question we might ask is, do other employers also have this need? In this chart below, you can see the top industries that employ this occupation in Central Ohio. The number one there is pesticide, fertilizer, and other agricultural chemical manufacturing. Scott's Miracle-Gro is located here in Columbus. And so maybe they also have a need. And maybe it's not one employer that has a need for this occupation. Maybe it's spread across multiple industries and multiple partners. So again, this is really important to keep having these conversations with employers about what their needs are and to form a more comprehensive picture. So this brings us back to our flowchart. Say we've determined that yes, there is sufficient labor market need for this role. The next question we have to ask is, do we have a program that already teaches those in-demand skills? One way of looking at this is to look at the job titles that are already assigned to the occupations, because sometimes you find things that surprise you. When we pulled the job titles for chemical plant and system operators occupation, the number one here is sterile processing technicians. Columbus State has a sterile processing technology program, but the SIP code to that program is aligned to health professions. That program is meant to train students to work in hospitals and in surgery. I'm going to refer to Michelle, who's going to tell you a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Laura and I had a lot of back and forth on this particular slide because I think it's a really great example of just the need for continued engagement with the employer, but also that discretion and the human in the machine as we're running these reports. So especially in industries, the SOC codes get revised every 4 years, but they tend to group different industries together. I can tell you from experience that pharmaceutical, for example, tends to be some of the harder LMI reports to run because they'll be grouped in with manufacturing, so manufacturing equipment operators. But this highly regulated environment, the specialized knowledge and skills that is in that industry tends to skew the skills, the educational background, the wages much higher. And so you really have to bring a lot of discernment when you're looking at the job titles and the employers and kind of discipline your report results to better reflect what the reality is. So if you just turn it out, you're going to get some noise in that data that will has the potential to give you an inaccurate labor market projection. So that's where, it really is about having that conversation with someone who knows the employer market, but then, an analyst like Laura who is able to interpret the data, because both are really important in terms of turning out reliable results on that. And I think the sterile processing was a great example. I was like, well, that's in our health area and pretty, is really aligned to like operating rooms and those types of skills. Are they transferable? Sure. I'm sure that there would be some transferability, but I don't know that I would put that particular program like in front of this employer and say, here, we met your need. I think they might look at us a little bit funny if we did that. So again, there's just a high need of discernment as we're doing this work.
Thanks, Michelle. Another way we can use some of this Lightcast data to continue having conversations with employers is to generate the skills that are listed in job postings within this occupation. And so here we see a list of the top 10 skills that show up on job postings. And what's interesting here is this growth piece, because we can see which skills maybe we need to be embedding more of, and maybe we need to put this into more programs. This disinfecting one is a good example. They're seeing 16.8% growth in the job postings of mentions of this skill. So this gives us a starting place to come back to the employers and say, here's what people are putting in job postings. Are these the skills you're looking for? And Michelle's going to talk a little bit more about assessing our existing programs and the gaps that might be in them.
Absolutely. As we move from sort of just assessing the overall labor market need to doing that detailed analysis on how close we are with our existing programming to meeting that workforce need, the skill list that we'll get from labor market information. Laura had pulled up the one from Lightcast, but I guess I can do it too. But you'll see similar in BLS or other labor market sources, is a really great starting place to understand the overall skills that employers are listing in their job postings. But from a curriculum development standpoint, there's a really big leap between a general topic of decontamination, for example, and sitting down and writing content to meet that need. So one of the things that we use kind of as a first order of business is going out to existing competency models or skill repositories to see if that inventorying has been done. So there are nationwide competency models. And here in Ohio, we're about 2 years in on a large endeavor from our manufacturing association to create an Ohio manufacturing competency model that kind of outlines, fundamental sort of workplace skills, personal efficacy, soft skills, we have historically called it. Then going into that manufacturing subsector and what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are shared across the entire manufacturing sector, and then going into actually industry specific subsectors. So those might not be shared across the full industry. So it is a giant spreadsheet that has about 2,000, depending on which model you're looking at, knowledge, skills, and abilities. So it really goes in by topic and specialization to outline, that what would be expected of someone kind of early career, mid, and advanced level stages. So depending on what type of programming we're targeting, if it's an entry level open enrollment program, maybe we're looking at that entry level. But we also do a lot of upskilling programs. So maybe we're sort of shooting for that next few rungs up the ladder. So referencing the competency model really helps us to figure out quickly what the knowledge, skills, and abilities are. And we sit down and do the tedious work of mapping that against our current program. So if we know, hey, I think our GMP manufacturing program covers a lot of those topics that the competency model outlines, we can go in and looking at the learning objectives from that course or program, figure out if there's a gap. And then also if there are gaps, how important are those topics? The competency models really outline the whole spectrum of knowledge, skills, and abilities a technician or operator would be expected to know, but not everything is high importance. So, we would be looking typically at making sure that we don't have gaps in that high and medium criticality pieces. The low areas, maybe that's something that's knowledge that's nice for someone to have, but maybe they pick it up later or on the job. That tells us, how important it is to prioritize those topics. Certainly, as we're looking at those programs, we want to ensure that aligns with the level of employees. So whether it's entry or an upskilling program, that we're meeting the majority, if not all, of those high and medium criticality knowledge, skills, and abilities through our program. So that's sort of the benchmark that we're using. So again, there are plenty of different models out there, but this is a good starting place for us in the manufacturing sector to just quickly, we're talking, sitting down in a matter of days, depending on, how big the program is. It can take a while, but it's not months to figure out quickly how well we are matched up against what the employers are looking for. It also gives us a good list of a starting place to present to employers to show like, hey, let's go from here and refine that. I always hate presenting any employers with a white sheet of paper and saying, hey, what do you want? What do you want from an employee? We tend to get a lot of soft skills and not as much in the technical area. So using a competency model like this can help you to present a refined and focused list. And it's a jumping off place, but it gives you a good head start rather than starting, from basics. So again, those are some of the factors that we use when we're thinking about building additional programming out. We kind of talked, and I think generally we default to thinking about open enrollment, traditional models, but many times in these specialized sectors, maybe an upskilling program or apprenticeship or something that's really focused would have more traction. So that is a key part of figuring out, what's going to serve the industry best. A general open enrollment program probably has the highest risk factor in terms of, it's a if you build it, they will come type of model. You're hoping that there's enough demand, the demand's attractive or the opportunity is attractive enough, the wages are high enough that people will self-select into that program with the appropriate marketing support. Maybe apprenticeship or upskilling provides a little bit more of a safety net way for you to build and bring new programs to market. I do a lot of work in the workforce space. So what can we do in that 3 to 4 month time frame to prepare workforce, and then making sure that we have a strong crosswalk, right, on ramp into that degree programming. So can we get folks in these chemical operator roles with a workforce program that articulates or steps them into an engineering technology degree down the road, and often with employer support through tuition reimbursement. So there's a lot of different options that you're thinking about as we try to answer this question about should we offer a new program. And we just wanted to point out that the decision-making part is the kind of the first step. Typically in manufacturing, they're resource-intensive programs, a lot of fun toys or equipment that needs resourcing, as well as making sure that we have strong employer connections along the way. So the same labor market info that we would present to leadership to determine whether a new program is appropriate, is very similar to what we would use in our grants applications or with employers as we talk about and build the case for our ROI to their organization. Laura's going to talk in a few slides about how we do that really strategically, talking about alumni outcomes, but we also can show that through just our throughput in technician roles and within different subsectors. I also wanted to point out, this work isn't happening in a silo. Laura and I, on Teams calls together, you could have the best data in the world, but if no one is seeing it and leveraging it, it's really not helpful. So at Columbus State in our advanced technology division, which is a cross-functional team, so lowercase word division of academic affairs, marketing, admissions, advising, frontline support. We want to make sure that everyone has this data, so it doesn't just live within, one, capital D division or one team at the college. So Laura joins our team twice a year for a deep dive analysis. So every spring she comes and talks to, representatives from all the teams listed in that center box. And we look at labor market trends. Are we seeing growth in the manufacturing sector? Is it taking a dip? Do we see certain subsectors kind of advancing out in front of others? And then also looking at that skills report to see, where are we seeing movement or shifts in the skills that are appearing in job postings and within the labor market. I think AI is a really great example. That was not on job postings, in manufacturing a few years ago, but we are starting to see that is baked into individual roles, but also just as a skill, in any role, including technicians. And then each fall, she comes in and presents us with a deep dive on our alumni outcomes. So how are our students doing after they leave the college? Where are they finding successes out in the workforce? And that, intelligence really helps to drive a lot of decision making at the college with regard to how we strategically prioritize our work within the advanced manufacturing sector. Yeah, Laura, do you want to talk a little bit about the alumni outcomes tool?
Always, Michelle. So we've talked a lot today about meeting employer needs, but as people who work in higher ed, we're also really concerned with meeting student needs. There is a large movement right now to better track labor market outcomes post-graduation. The state of Ohio just included a metric for labor market outcomes in our state share of instruction funding model. So this is directly impacting our funding at this point. So it's really important for us to collect labor market outcomes for our graduates, both so we can better serve students, but also so that we understand the impact to ourselves as an institution. We do not have a program of study that aligns to that chemical plant and systems operators, as we already mentioned. So I'm going to show you today some of the alumni pathways data for our electromechanical engineering technology, AAS. I'm going to say EMEC because that is quite a title. So the alumni pathways tool is a project that Lightcast has where they go out and collect resume data off of websites like LinkedIn, GitHub, anything that has a resume on it. And they put together these profiles, and we send graduate data, and they match our graduates to their profiles so that they can tell us what is happening with our graduates after they leave here. The first number we see on this screen over to the left is the 209. That is the number of graduates from the EMEC program they were able to match to their programs. That's 52%, so about half of the graduates we submitted. That's far better than the survey response rate for any graduate survey I've ever done. So it's a reasonable sample size. The next question we see, or the next number we see here, is about whether the graduates are employed in field. Of the 209 graduates, 59% of them are employed in field. And this is referring back to that SIP program to SOC occupation crosswalk. And it's saying these programs are aligned to these occupations based on that crosswalk, and they are considered to be employed in field if they have a job in one of these occupations. That doesn't mean that the other students don't have good jobs or aren't using those skills in some other way that's maybe not as clear-cut connected, especially in these niche sectors like Michelle was talking about earlier. It just means these are the ones that kind of went where we expected them to go. And as a point of comparison, I also looked at all of our Columbus State graduates that were matched to the Lightcast data who are employed in field, and that percentage was 67%. So it's a little bit lower than our overall student body. The next question is, where do graduates live? 82% of our graduates from our EMEC program are residing in that 11-county region that we described as Central Ohio. That's a little bit higher than our entire student body, which about 78% of those graduates reside in region. We are a community college. We do expect our graduates to remain in our community. That might be a little bit different if your graduates are more likely to kind of spread out over a wider area. We also use this data to demonstrate the impact of Columbus State to our employers and industry partners. When we work with our partners, this takes a lot of their time. right? This conversation is ongoing. We come back to them. We need to make sure that we can show them that the result of that is that they are hiring graduates to come work in their facilities. Over on the left-hand side, we see the top 10 employers of the graduates of the EMEC program. The number one is Honda. That's not surprising because we have a Honda plant in Marysville, just north of the city. So that is a major employer for our graduates. And to the right, we see the industry sectors that employ our graduates. And the number one is transportation equipment manufacturing, which again links back to Honda. So this also helps guide us in terms of finding new partnerships we might be interested in, and also just demonstrating once again the impact of this work for our employers. We also use our alumni pathways data to look at skills. And this was a really interesting finding. These are the skills that graduates are listing on their resumes. And over to the right, we can see the list of specialized skills. So thinking of those as kind of those technical skills that graduates are listing. And these are the ones you would expect, right? Electromechanics, PLCs, AutoCAD, electrical wiring. But what's surprising is that alumni are underreporting these skills. Only 15% of our graduates are listing electromechanics, and they graduated from an electromechanical engineering program. That means 85% of them are not putting that on their resume. That's concerning, right? Because this is the first connection that many of our graduates are going to make with the employer. And so this is really helpful to us from an operational standpoint because we can take this data and turn around and make changes with it in our career services office and with faculty, trying to help students understand very clearly that these are the skills you're gaining through this program and you need to put them on your resume. Especially with the advent of AI, right? Like we know that AI is being used pretty heavily sometimes in the hiring space. And so if these buzzword kind of terms aren't on the resumes, they're probably not making it through the process. So we've covered a lot of ground today. We started with talking about program exploration. How do we know we should offer a program? What are the data points that we look at? We moved into curriculum development. What skills should we be teaching? How do we know what those skills are? How do we communicate with the employer about it? We touched on strategic planning. How are we planning for growth? How are we funding these models? And finally, we landed on measuring success. And how do we know that our programs are successful? How do we know that our students are being well served? And how do we share that with our employers? Thank you so much for having us today. Michelle and I have really enjoyed being here.
Thank you, Laura and Michelle, for that great presentation. Here are some also additional kind of free resources that we have. If any of you would like to kind of scan that QR code, look at some of these reports that we have released. If you don't want to pull out your phone, we will also send links to these in kind of our follow-up email as well. But wanted to send kind of a quick poll to ask, if you wanted to talk with one of the Lightcast specialists about using data to build, market-aligned programs. If you do want us to contact you, we're happy to reach out, talk about some of these strategies. If you've never heard of us, happy to do that. Even if you are a Lightcast client and maybe this sparks some new interest or some new strategies, we're happy to meet and maybe do some training as well. Or you can click the no thanks, not right now. We will keep that poll open until the end of this webinar. But now we would like to jump into some Q&A. I will go through some of the questions that were asked in the chat. We also have some questions that were asked before the webinar. We'll try to get through as many as we can. And then any of those that we aren't able to get through, we will also send those questions and answers in kind of the follow-up email with all of the resources. Kind of the first question that I have is, would you say that Columbus State has a centralized curriculum planning process? At my institution, I could see challenges given many of these discussions originate with individual faculty members.
We do not have a centralized office that controls all curriculum development. Really, a lot of that gets determined through partnership in early phase discussions with the employer. So what sector are we looking at? Obviously in the healthcare, it'd go to the healthcare teams. In our areas at manufacturing, we work closely with our academic affairs partners to figure out if this is going to be a good fit for a credit-based program or non-credit. We do have a centralized non-credit workforce development area. It's a small team of folks, and we partner with SMEs from industry to write that content. So it kind of depends on, what exactly the need is. But I will say, just as an institution, we do a lot of intentional cross-pollination across both credit and non-credit programs. So that way we're able to really quickly figure out, who's going to be the best quarterback for that conversation and make sure that we're not bouncing around our employer partners a lot.
Thank you, Michelle. I think you answered this a little bit, but didn't know if you wanted to add anything else to this. When you say we check in with the employers on their needs, what does that specifically look like, and how are you gathering that insight?
Sure. So we do that in a couple of different ways. Like, any accredited organization, we will have advisory councils that are meeting regularly with our academic affairs within the individual divisions. But one tool that we've started to adopt really broadly here at the college is the business and industry leadership team model. So any of you in the NSF ATE community have probably heard about that, but that is this idea of co-ownership of program and development between our employer partners and the industry. And we do a lot of, we do annual competency kind of validation exercises where we present that list of knowledge, skills, and abilities and go through a voting exercise to ensure that we're looking, today and 5 years into the future of those skills. And so that's a iterative process that happens on a regular and predictable cadence in partnership with our leadership and business and industry leadership team. And so that's been one really important way that we have stayed abreast of the quick changes. We're not waiting for the gap to appear. We're actually proactively on that schedule, kind of polling and pulling that information together. Those builds rely really heavily on the competency repositories as a starting place, but then we're able to add and really nuance and take that next level of refinement.
Thank you. Are you leveraging this to help Gen Ed, Associates of Art, or Associate of Science students to find jobs?
Certainly staying abreast of innovations and changes, is the duty of everyone at the college. So it's not just in manufacturing or any sector. Again, our advisory councils and committees, take it very seriously to stay abreast of changes. Of course, they also have to work with accrediting partners and others. So I'm not in the arts and sciences, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but certainly it is something that the college invests in very heavily.
I would like to add one thing about that. That SIP to SOC crosswalk is really tricky for those Associate of Arts and Associate of Science degrees, right? Because what is the correct in-field occupation for Associate of Arts student, right? Our intention with those students is that they are intending to graduate and transfer, right? And then whatever their 4-year credential is, you would think that would drive more the occupational code that we're expecting for those students. So it is a little tricky, and I do want to plant the seed of, like, the SIP to SOG crosswalk is great, it's useful, it's not perfect, and so it's something to keep in mind when you're using it. Also want to say that that's not anybody's fault. Like, this is very, very difficult work to do. It's very complicated, and our economy is pretty fluid and lets people move between spaces in a way that is hard to capture.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dab of paint, right?
Dab of paint.
Dab of paint.
How do you educate the potential workforce to the opportunities in this field?
How do you educate the employers or like upcoming students and prospective students?
My guess is probably the student side of it.
Sure. That is the $1 million question. And there's so much work and exciting work happening across the state in that sector. Or to answer that question, it is now a trite thing to say that manufacturing today is very different than it was yesterday, but those perceptions do persist. They're generational in some cases, in families that have had historical connection to manufacturing. So there's a lot of work in just exposing students to the manufacturers of today, to exposing them to the technology. So whether that's going out into the K-12 schools and bringing sort of some of the technologies that we can translate into an industrial context. So think about small robotic systems that we can, show how it would connect to an industrial context and build those bridges, but in a fun and exciting way. We're doing a lot with industry tours where we're actually bringing people into the plants because they can hear ad nauseum someone like us saying, hey, it's not dark, dirty, dangerous anymore. But it's when they see it that, really people start to get excited. And also focusing on the technologies. Folks today, young people today are very mission driven. And so it's really cool to be able to say, if you care about innovations in healthcare and creating life-saving medicines, you don't have to move to Boston or San Francisco to do that. You can be in the cutting edge of biotechnology here in Central Ohio. If you care about climate change and want to be part of the green revolution, again, huge battery manufacturer for the EV transition, solar manufacturing. We have one of the largest manufacturers here as well for solar panels. You can be part of these sort of mission-driven economies right here in our region. So we find that also gets a lot of attention as young people are planning out their careers. So it's about exposure, repetition, and really making sure that we're presenting an authentic experience for students early and often.
How are you connecting the dots with your local ISDs?
The industry sector partnerships?
Independent school districts.
We work really closely with our school districts. We have a wonderful team here at the college that is responsible for K-12 partnerships. And so we meet with that team weekly, regularly to figure out, what are we seeing trends with our schools? How can we help them to prepare their students for those crosswalks? So we're seeing a lot of traction in the K-12 space with industry recognized credentials, for example. And that's driving us to take a look at those same credentials and figure out, hey, how can we create a one-to-one understanding for those or other trends that they're seeing. So again, it is really about building those relationships and leveraging our team here to kind of help make sense of trends, and then making sure that within the advanced technologies area that we're being really responsive to what we're seeing and saying, okay, our internal customers are saying they need X, Y, Z, and kind of prioritizing that, in our planning and development.
Kind of two that go together. Tracking alumni outcomes is always a challenge. Have you employed any innovative ways of doing this that are providing good results? And do you incentivize alumni feedback? If so, how?
So that is another $1 million question, right? And we look at a couple things. We buy unemployment insurance wage record data. So that's one way. And I did a whole presentation about this at the Association for Institutional Research about using Lightcast data and using unemployment insurance wage record data. And both of them have merits. And there are some things one shows better, and there's some things that the other shows better. But one thing I will say that we're not doing, but our partners at Ohio University are doing, is they are doing alumni surveys, and they are marrying that with their wage record data to build dashboards to track out all of the outcomes. So that's kind of my benchmarking, like peer group I want to be in, right? And they do have public dashboards. And they have all their methodology out there. So this is a plug for OU's institutional research team. They're doing a great job with that, if that's a thing you're interested in looking at.
Thanks, Laura. Where are you located in your organization? Could you describe a little bit more about your collaboration with academic affairs and other units?
So I sit in the Office of Talent Strategies. So our division is located, philosophically located at that intersection point between employers, academic affairs, as well as non-credit. So we are take pride in being the sense makers across those different sectors. So that way, again, the employer doesn't get bounced around a lot. We can kind of quarterback, but then very quickly through those built-in partnerships, figure out who's going to be best deployed, to meet that workforce need. So I know it sounds like a very, general answer, but that is the role that the division is. We are the sense makers and really own that gray space to ensure that whatever the need is, we'll get it over to the right team and get that actioned.
And I am in the institutional research office. So most colleges have an institutional effectiveness or institutional research team, and I'm nested in that. And so that's kind of a unique position because typically we're focused on institutional data, right? And that analyst data is not institutional data, right? That's economics data. And so sometimes people are nested like under a president's office, or they have someone who specifically, that's their whole job. They just do that. We don't have that capacity right now. It kind of comes to me, or it comes to other kind of super users around campus. Like our grants office has someone who's super well versed in Lightcast, and she pulls that same kind of data when she's writing proposals.
How are the career service professionals involved in this project/discussion?
Yeah, our career services team is a key work stream in our advanced technologies initiative. We have we include them in our regular ongoing initiatives as well as in the annual report outs. So we have proactive pathways advising here at the college, which means that both our academic advising as well as our career advising, as well as our academic partners, all work together to kind of create this, I think, the burrito of support, and to make sure that they have a identified point of contact who has both the programmatic as well as the labor market data to serve students. So as we, develop reports, as well as we plan out our strategic priorities for the year, thinking about, what do we need to do to move the needle on getting our students connected with the career services and with jobs in these sectors. They're one of the key stakeholders we have internally.
I know we're getting close to time, so I'll ask one more question, and any of the other ones that we didn't get to, like I said before, we'll send kind of a follow-up answer in the emails. But how are you utilizing pre-apprenticeships or apprenticeships in building the advanced manufacturing talent pipeline?
Yeah, apprenticeship, like anything else, it's an evolving program. We do have several registered apprenticeships here at the college, long-standing in our skilled trades area, but we're starting to see increasing interest from our manufacturing base as well. However, what we really are, our key marquee program here at the state is a flexible apprenticeship program called the Modern Manufacturing Work Study. So it is a flexible apprenticeship that pairs students at the end of their first year with employers in manufacturing, and then we have a sister program in IT to connect them with paid work-based learning in their second year with our employer partners. Honda is our premier, our largest employer partner in the modern manufacturing program, for example. And so we're able to connect earlier students with technical skills. So we front load them, but then with careers starting at the end of their second semester through that flexible apprenticeship program.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Laura, and thank you, Michelle, for that great presentation and answering all those questions. And thank you all for joining. We will be sending out the recording and the slide deck and some of those Q&As and resources tomorrow in an email. But thanks again for everyone joining, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day.